Welcome back to ECTV 40's Inspiring the Flock. I'm Ainsley and today we have an Out of the Studio special at Folklore Cafe.
That's right, and with us today is special guest Cassy Debacco. She's a mathematics major, and Cassy, Ainsley, and I have sort of become really close over the year, and I think, Cassy, you offer so much great insight, and today's topic is about finding life's purpose and sort of values to live by, and I really think, I'm really hopeful for what we'll get out of this conversation.
Right. And with that, our first question is going to be, can somebody have a purpose that changes over time?
So, at first, I would say that is definitely a loaded question, because whenever I was a kid, my goal was, one day, hopefully I could become, the President of the United States. And for other people, it's like becoming astronauts or, going and doing something with their life. And I really am a strong believer that, your life's purpose does change over time, and it really goes hand in hand with, your values and sort of how each value sort of lines up and gears you towards a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally see where you're coming from. I think I have a little bit of a different perspective, that I think that we all have one purpose in life. And as someone who is a Jesus follower, I think that my purpose and really all of our purposes are to have God be known and to know Him. So I think that that can be shown in a lot of different ways, and that we can fulfill that one lifelong life purpose through our occupations, towards how we act towards others. So there's a multitude of ways of how we can fulfill our life purpose.
Right. I kind of agree. I think that you have one life purpose, and you're not going to figure that out at one specific point in your life, one specific time period. But I think you have different purposes of living at each stage of your life, but these all kind of contribute towards your purpose of life, your one big purpose, but you might not really know that through the seasons of life, but you're just in this journey of figuring that out, but that you can define why you're living and what that means to you at different stages.
And actually, I want to build off what you said, Cassy. So, I'm a strong believer as well. However, is there times when there's times where I could be unsure. However, I think it really does guide purpose greatly. But I think another large sort of piece to take from that is actually, we don't have a quote this week, and the one thing I wanted to say is, from a little bit of research, we thought, purpose inspires and values guide and habits define. And I think that really speaks measures and volumes, especially in a topic like this, that you really have to follow what you love, and when you do follow what you love, this sort of purpose just sort of falls into place.
I absolutely agree. Right.
Yeah. Now, I do believe, though, you can love many things throughout your life, and that's where I think we might be a little different on that belief, that I believe that purposes, you could have multiples. It isn't just one thing.
Yeah. It sounds like we all can agree, though, that purpose is a lifelong journey of either fulfilling it or finding it. So.
Right. It's a lot of things that go into play.
All right.
And with that, we're going to take a little coffee break and return to our next segment.
Thank you, guys. Welcome back for our second segment. Motivation, is it guided by our gifts and natural talents?
Right, so I think that motivation, for some people, it often can be guided by our strengths and talents, but I think that motivation should more come from your purpose in life and your core beliefs about yourself, and that your strengths and talents and gifts are more assets and are ways that there are things that are given to you that can help equip you to fulfill your purpose in life. And your motivation should come from trying to fulfill that purpose, as we were talking about.
Right. I think that everything you do is driven by what you're naturally good at, because that's your natural calling. You feel that itch inside of you that's to just follow the path in which things that you were good at, things that you enjoy doing. And so I think that just paves the path for you throughout your life to just do things that really fulfill you.
Yeah, there's a reason why you're kind of given those natural gifts, and
Absolutely.
they help you throughout your life.
Absolutely.
So let me pose this question. How critical is it to sort of be uncomfortable and put yourself in situations that aren't sort of at your comfort zone, that kind of stuff?
That's a good question.
Right. I think that we all are faced in situations in life that we don't know how to deal with, that we're uncomfortable. And I think that when we're in those times of discomfort is where we can really grow the most. So personally, whenever I'm uncomfortable, sometimes it's the best way that I can share the gospel of God or my personal beliefs about others and just share love. And I think that's the most important part, is just really fulfilling my purpose and letting others know how much I care for them.
Yeah, I think you really listen to yourself. Sorry, I think you really listen to yourself in those times that like things that might not be going your way, you're uncomfortable, or you really fall on your feet. That you're actually listening to yourself and what you need and what you want, versus times when everything seems to be going well. Like you're just listening to what you think you want, not what you really think you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that brings, now that you said something about like how you sort of really can find yourself when you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, I have a weird thought, like a thought went through my mind. So when things are genuine, like when things just happen, do you think that always reflects that person and what their sort of beliefs are in that mindset? I just want to take a little subsection here and just think about that. So what I'm trying to get to is, do you think that when things are just spontaneous, that that's where you can actually take what you really love? Like you can find what you really love when things just happen?
I often feel like it can be that way, because when you're being spontaneous, then you're usually speaking from the heart, and that's when the best things in life happen.
Right. Most people, I think, they model their actions, whether that's spontaneous or like just planned out. I think it comes from a place you make those decisions based off of your core values and like what you believe is true and right and real.
Yeah, and a lot of people will even say at the end of their, like, you know, when they're looking back, that they just can't believe where they're at, and it's sort of like all those weird weird turns that you take and all that stuff. You never know what's going to come out of it.
Yeah.
And I think today, or it was a couple days ago, our friend Garrett was telling us about how in order to be old and wise, you have to be young and dumb. And I think it's important to know that you can have those falls, and you're going to fall. I remember before when we were planning for the show, I asked you, you know, is it critical to fall? And then once I said that, I was like, oh my God, she's going to say, Lucas, come on now.
It's inevitable.
Right?
It is inevitable.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah.
All right, with that, we're going to take a coffee break and return for our next segment.
Thank you.
We're back from our coffee break for our next segment, where we're going to be talking about, does family background and location impact your values?
So what's interesting about this is, I think in our past subjects, like we talked a lot more about theory and like sort of the hypotheticals, and I think now that we can actually start of looking, you can really use this point to look at a lot of data to sort of like understand what the outcomes of certain people's situations are. But I think personally that, you know, and I'll even use my example of having a having a divorced family, has sort of changed my values for good about what I want in the future with my own life and my own family. But I kind of have a feeling that's sort of like a double-edged sword in a way. How you can come from sort of like, I wouldn't say torn at all, because, you know, my parents, they really made it work. However, I think you could either come out of that being like, I don't want to do anything with that, or you could come out of it and say, you know, I want something different, and this is what I'm going to value, and that really can set up your purpose for life. So in that case, I believe that sort of like your family background and your location all play an effect.
Right. I think there's a variety of situations that can have an impact on any person, whether that's for the good or the bad. That's up to the person. There's not like a set way it's going to affect each one, and that's like something really unique about like each person's journey, is that they can choose to let them affect that as much or as little as they want it to. So
Yeah, it's like that quote, you can't control what things happen to you, but you can control how you respond. So that just like really reflects that. And you can like pick and choose like what you've learned growing up and where you've lived and who you've lived with, of like what aspects you want to take with you throughout your life, and also what beliefs, what values you don't really appreciate and want to leave behind. And that's really a personal choice, which I really like that we get that opportunity.
Right. So I actually grew up, Pennsylvania is now the 7th state that I've lived in, which has provided me like a really unique childhood growing up. So I picked like different pieces from all the places that I've lived in to form my core value set, and it's really cool because I had my siblings, my family, which like allowed for like this really stable, loving environment each place that I lived, but also a really cool aspect that a lot of me is from each of those places that I've lived, and I wouldn't be the same person if it wasn't having, taken little bits from each place.
Your location and your family impacted you, but in the end, you also, who you are on the inside, got to kind of decide who you wanted to be.
Right, absolutely.
It's amazing. It's so cool how we can sort of see how this segment sort of ties back in around sort of how it's just all about your real inner self showing when you're put into situations. It's what do you really believe deep down. And that brings me back to a topic that we actually, Ainsley introduced here during the first segment, is purpose of life versus purpose of living. Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's just my view on purpose of life. I think that you have one overall purpose of life, but that you can decide what your purpose of living is at each point of life. And that can be really helpful, especially throughout points of transition, when you're trying to figure out, like, what is my purpose of life? Maybe that's like a really big question to answer, for a lot of people, just like one succinct answer, but you can always decide what is it that I'm living for right now, and that can look different throughout the seasons, which is, I think, it can ultimately empower a lot of people. Just to realize that can look different, but in a lot of ways that's contributing to what their purpose of life is ultimately.
Kind of be exciting when you're in new seasons of life and you're going through transitions. Also scary, like going into college was definitely scary for me, but overall can be exciting because you're finding new ways to fulfill your purpose and new ways to connect with other people, and just make genuine connections. So that can be a really exciting time.
Right. Whether or not you realize it, you're fulfilling your life purpose all along, and
absolutely,
you might not even know it yet.
And I really liked how you brought up seasons. That's just, I know something that we were talking about the other week is sort of how we go through these passages of seasons, and it's to really just take a moment to sit back, breathe it in, and just live the season in which you're in, because it all sort of has that end value in a way. And I wanted to bring up another example. This was earlier today, actually, when I was going to talk to somebody on campus. They sort of told me how her husband was sort of finding his own purpose, and how he's been working at a place for 40 years now, and he has kids as well. And she just said that work wasn't his purpose, and I thought that's so interesting because for so many people, they might hear that, oh, this guy is 40 years here at a job. That must be his purpose in life is all into this company. But in reality, what his real purpose may be, when somebody asks him, okay, so you're working there, and he goes, yeah, it's a job. Then that means you're really finding his real purpose. Actually, his heart's back home. He really wants to be with his kids and all that. It just happens to be that he just has a job as well.
I have a little bit of a different view in that for me, it's not really about finding my purpose, as I know what my purpose was when I was born, will be at the end of my life. But I think it's interesting that we can think that we know what we're supposed to be doing in life, but it can change, and we can go in different directions. But in the end, I think that we'll all be fulfilling one purpose and get to a certain place in life, and we're that was what I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
And we sort of see that differential, especially when I talk a lot about occupation. I sort of see that purpose through occupation. You sort of let me know that there are sort of other point of views to it, and that was really beneficial. So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, that's the end of that segment, and we're going to go take another coffee break. So we'll be back. Thank you. Welcome back to our last segment here at Folklore. So our last segment is about, are changes something easy to see sort of as it's happening, or is it something you sort of observe over time?
Right, that's a good question. I think that it's more apparent to see over time. I don't know. It could also be as it's happening. It kind of depends on the situation and what phase of life you're in.
And the person.
Right. It's a unique humanistic experience that's different for each person. But I don't know. I think it would be easier to see over time, just as you make those big transitions throughout life, and you're oh, I valued this then, but I value this now. But I think as the further you get along in life, those values tend to stick to be the same because you make those big decisions based off of the same core values.
I have a lot of core values and beliefs that are very constant, like my faith and just like love and compassion towards others. But I've also done a lot of self-reflecting over the past few years, and there's also some beliefs that I have about myself that have definitely changed, and some things that I've valued or I've put value in things and I shouldn't have. And so I've been able to see those changes as it's happening, and I think that it's been easy for me to do it as it's happening, just because I've been reflecting so much and trying to change those values or things that I hold on to that I don't really like. So that's been my personal journey, is that I can see it as it's happening.
And it's all learning, right? It's nothing, to drop a value isn't really dropping it at all. You're actually learning from, I'm in a different stage now. It's not what I need to be focusing on.
I think some things can be like that, but also for me, there's things like maybe like vanity, like just being really concerned of what I look like or how others view me. And that's a value that I don't want to hold on to, and that's something that I can't leave behind in the past. So there are things that maybe just change in the seasons, and also things that are just a little too young for me, and I just need to grow out of it.
Right. I think there's some things that you're only going to learn the more you experience life, and that you're just too young at this point, or a few years ago, to realize then that you just need to experience things more.
It's all about self-reflection in that way.
Yeah.
And for somebody like me, I try to self-reflect a lot, and actually that's why I can sort of see the change. Probably like every month, I kind of can sort of pick up on values that I'm just like leaving behind. And one thing I would want to build off on that is to sort of be more relaxed and just sit and just let those values like sort of like feel them, and don't just be so quick to give them up,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I don't know if you have any insight on that sort of thing.
I think I'm always doing a mental check and relating it back to my purpose in life, and what am I valuing right now, what's my highest priority, and does it help me fulfill my purpose in life, or is it holding me back? And I think that I'm just constantly evaluating that, and that can be really comforting, because it's like, well, if it's not helping me, then I can just let it go, and it can be really freeing.
Right. Just making decisions based off of, for me, like my core values, what am I valuing? What is this doing for me? As a way, especially like through periods of transition, when things get difficult, of how am I gonna go about this? Like, I'm in control of the situation and how I react. So what do I value, and how am I gonna react based off those things?
It's about getting out and trying new things. So, yeah. And I think as we take a look back at the segments, the first thing we focused on was about motivation. Is it guided by our gifts and natural talents? And I think we had a really good discussion on that. And I think what we pulled from it is, it sort of is about that, but it's also about putting yourself in new situations and sort of like going outside the boundaries in that way.
Right.
For our second segment, does your location and family background impact your values? And I think we sort of had a little mixed consensus on that. Part of us really believed, like your family does impact that, and the other part of us, is it sort of predetermined in a way? Like, do we have the strength to go against the battles that are coming our way? And it's a lot about how you sort of take those experiences, like what you said about traveling to different states, sort of what can I take from it? And then I remember on our last segment, which is now, we sort of come to a resolution that, it's kind of like a mixture of things. It's about what season you're in and what can you sort of see as a change in values, and that sort of thing. And I know we're wrapping up here, so I do want to introduce a topic. Do you want to introduce the topic?
No, you can go ahead. Go for it.
All right. So it's, are we really interconnected, and sort of what is the impact of technology on our generation? And I know we're very excited to say that we will have a special guest on there as well. And we don't know exactly who that is yet, if we're being honest. We're still pulling in some possible people that will have the best insight to give you guys as viewers.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, we want to thank Cassy for coming on as our guest speaker. We really enjoyed having you. And we want to thank you guys, the viewers, for tuning in to watch this episode. We really couldn't do this without you, and we hope you tune in next episode.
And not just that, we also want to thank the production team of ECTV 40. You guys are honestly amazing to take time out of your schedule to do this, so thank you so much.
All right, until next time.